Hey, welcome to the Blue Couch TV. I'm Rochelle Deman, and it's my absolute honor to be here with you today. So I'm a real estate agent right here at Harcourt's Done in Durbanville. If you are looking at selling property or wanting to sell, or you know of anybody, please do not hesitate to contact me on my WhatsApp number right here below or send me a mail. So today I'm speaking to Robert Kraut-Kramer. Robert, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Nice to be here.
Robert, so what role does the Estate Agency Affair Board play in the real estate industry?
Okay, what the EAAB does at the moment is they basically regulate the property industry when it comes to estate agents. So it consists of three things. They govern the registration of estate agents, they govern the training of estate agents, and also compliance. In other words, wherever estate agents are supposed to comply with the Code of Conduct or the Estate Agency Affairs Act, the Estate Agency Affairs Board is there to make sure that that's what estate agents do. And above all, of course, to make sure that estate agents do trade legally, which means they're supposed to be in possession of a Fidelity Fund certificate if they're going to trade as estate agents. And that is basically what the EAAB does. It's a big governing body to which all estate agents report and belong, and that's basically it. They just govern the industry from that point of view.
In short, what is the Property Practitioner Act?
Well, the Property Practitioner Bill is actually no longer in existence. It's now the Property Practitioners Act. So it is now a piece of actual legislation. What happened is that it used to be a bill. A bill is just basically a word for a draft piece of legislation. It went through all the necessary checks and balances. It went out for comment. And eventually, the President signed it into law a couple of months ago. But it hasn't been effected yet. In other words, it hasn't actually commenced. So what's happened is that the bill has been approved by Parliament. It's gone through all the processes. It's been changed a few times. So we now have what is known as the Property Practitioners Act, which is going to replace the Estate Agency Affairs Act once it does eventually commence. The reason that it hasn't commenced yet is now because we're still waiting for the regulations to be finalized, the actual rules which pertain to the Act. So that is still in draft format. That came out, I think it was in August last year, if I remember correctly. So we're still waiting for the final regulations to come out. And once that is signed into law, then I suppose the Act will commence. So at this stage, we don't quite yet know when that's going to happen. We've got no timeline at this stage.
How will the Act change the role of the EAAB?
It's not really going to change the role that much. The EAAB is basically just going to become the Property Practitioner Regulatory Authority, the PPRA, is what the new acronym is going to be. The only real difference I think that one can, I suppose, look at is the fact that the legislation is now going to involve a lot more people. Up until now, the definition of an estate agent consists of your typical estate agent, maybe your auctioneer. It's basically only people that sell properties at commission or rent out properties at commission. But once the PPA becomes effective, it's going to affect a lot more people. You're going to have mortgage bond originators, you're going to have property financiers possibly, even who are going to be subjected to the Act. So the umbrella concept is going to become a lot wider. So what's going to happen is that the EAAB, its role is going to be a lot bigger than what it is at the moment. The whole purpose of this change, I suppose, is to try and bring as many people that are involved in the property industry on a day-to-day basis, everybody who's involved in buying or selling of property or renting out property, anybody who's involved, even on the fringe, is going to now be governed by this legislation. So that's basically what's going to happen. So the EAAB will stop continuing in its present form and just continuing as the PPRA. That's basically what's going to happen. We don't yet know whether people working at the EAAB are going to have to reapply for their jobs or whether the CEO is going to be replaced. That we don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
How will this affect the role of the future estate agents?
It's going to affect the agents. There are some massive changes. I think one of the biggest changes that we're seeing is again with regard to your Fidelity Fund certificates. And I keep going back to Fidelity Fund because at the end of the day, if you don't have a Fidelity Fund certificate, you may not trade. And one of the biggest changes that we're going to see for estate agents is that if you trade without a Fidelity Fund certificate at the moment, once that commission is paid out, even though you weren't actually entitled to commission. So if a conveyancing attorney does a transfer but is not aware of the fact that the agent doesn't have an FFC and the seller hasn't made any specific objections, we pay it the commission and off we go. And if the seller finds out afterwards that the agent actually did not have an FFC at the time of trade, the seller cannot claim back the commission. So in other words, once that's been paid out, there's water under the bridge and the money's gone. But with this new piece of legislation, if a seller should find out at any time within 3 years after transfer that the agent did not have an FFC at the time of sale, he can go to the agent's door, knock on it and say, I believe you didn't have an FFC at the time of my sale. I want my money back right now. And the Act then says that the agent has to pay it back immediately. And if you don't, it's a criminal offense. So it's going to criminalize not just trading without an FFC, but your non-repayment of commission is also going to be criminalized. At least that's how I read and understand the Act. Now, that is a huge change to the current law. So on one hand, the estate agents are going to draw benefit from the fact that they will be deemed to be in possession of an FFC after 50 working days if the application was complete. So that's a nice thing to have. But the other side of that again is that if you don't have an FFC, you could have sleepless nights for the next 3 years, because if that seller finds out at any time in the future that you were paid without commission, or that you were paid commission without an FFC, you have to refund the full commission. So it's going to be in agents' interests now that they get their act together, those that don't do applications properly or that leave these things lying, to get their house in order. So from that point of view alone, there's going to be huge changes. The other big change that we're going to see here is the fact that it's now going to be compulsory, if you want to take a property to market, whether for rent or for sale, that you have to, your marketing, how can I put this, when you take a mandate, you have to get a property condition report or a disclosure form that's signed by the seller or the landlord. You're not allowed to take a property to market if you don't have a property condition report that has been signed off by the seller. And what the Act also says is that if you do market a property without one, then there's going to be a statutory presumption that you did not disclose any defects to the buyer or the tenant. So again, there's going to be a much bigger emphasis on this. There's going to be a much bigger obligation on estate agents to make sure that they have this property condition report signed off. Fortunately, the one that's being proposed in the current regulations, the draft regulations, is exactly the same one that the EAAB has published some years ago. So there won't be any change or any difference there. It's not like agents will have to now go and try and familiarize themselves with a whole new property condition report. We are able to still use the same one that we have at the moment, but like I said, it will become compulsory. So that's going to maybe present a few obstacles and a few challenges, but again, I'm sure we'll get over that. We'll work around that, because you also have some instances where your sellers, for example, are executors of deceased estates, or they've never put foot in the property because they've always rented it out for the past 5 years, and they don't want to sign a property condition report because they don't know if there's anything wrong with the property. But in those instances, we just told the agents, well, then you draw a line through it, and you just say there, seller not prepared or willing or able to sign this, and the buyer therefore buys at risk, and that's it. So as long as you put that on the paperwork, you should be fine. But if you have agents now that don't know how to deal with this, they could end up sitting with a problem later on because of defects and issues that arise later on. So yeah, there are definitely a lot of goods and a lot of bads that are coming out of the new piece of legislation.
How will the code of conduct change once the Act is implemented?
Not that much. There's literally one chapter that's going to be introduced, a new chapter. I had a look at it, and every single chapter that you have in the current code of conduct has been copied and pasted into the new code of conduct. The only one that changes is when it comes to any efforts by the agent to try and persuade a seller to send a transfer somewhere or to use a particular company to do compliance work. It's all about undue influence. And what the Act now says is that if I as an attorney have any interest in an estate agency, if I own an estate agency, or if anybody in my company works for, has an interest in an estate agency or has a relative working in a particular estate agency, I as attorney am not going to be allowed to accept any mandates from that agency. Why? Because the legislator wants to try and avoid any kind of undue influence between the agent and the seller by trying to persuade a seller to use Miltons because Miltons owns the estate agency or because Robert has shares in an estate agency. So in other words, there's going to be a massive drive against the possibility of undue influence. So that is the one big change we're going to see in the code of conduct, where it actually goes beyond your typical property practitioner, but it also ropes in attorneys and compliance companies, that we are not allowed to actually accept any work if we have an interest in the estate agency. So they're trying to clean up, because we all know there are instances where attorneys try and bribe estate agents to try and buy work and try and buy business. So they're trying to clean up that whole situation. So that's the one big change. The other big change that we've seen with regard to undue influence is that, for example, homeowners associations are not going to be allowed to try and dominate who's allowed to sell property on an estate. At the moment, we often see in security estates that homeowners associations want to try and push certain agencies. They want to try and benefit. What we're also going to see is that homeowners associations, for example, are going to be stopped from giving preferential treatment to certain estate agencies, because you often have a situation arising in your security estates where the homeowners associations only want agency A, B, and C to trade on the estate, and they have to pay for it, and they get to share in a certain percentage of the commission. And this Act now says no more of that. If I want to use XYZ as an estate agency instead of ABC as an owner in the estate, I'm allowed to do so. So they're going to try and cut down on that as well, where homeowners associations don't have so much say as to which agents or agencies are allowed to sell properties within the security estates. So that's another big change that we're going to see. But aside from the issue regarding undue influence and what they call harmful business practices, the entire code of conduct, or the draft code of conduct as we've seen it now, is going to remain literally exactly the same word for word. So that's the only real change that we've seen in the code of conduct. And then, of course, the introduction of the mandatory property condition report.
Robert, thank you so very much. It was lovely chatting to you today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And there you have it, another informative Blue Couch TV session. Till next week, same time, same place.